Now remember, Harris did very few one-on-one interviews while she was vice president, and the ones she did didn't go well. Remember the one with Lester Holt when she said she had been to the border and that then she hadn't, and it wasn't a big deal because she hadn't been to Europe either? The vice president has now pledged to provide hundreds of millions of dollars in funding for a southern border wall, which she previously called anti-democratic and called it Donald Trump's medieval vanity project. So she's got that flip-flop to explain. Harris also has dramatically changed her positions on issues like health care and the environment. The vice president has abandoned her previous support for Medicare for All and backed away from her prior calls to ban fracking. So will she be confronted about all these apparent flip-flops, and what other tough questions might she face tomorrow night? Joining us now is Chris Cillizza, former CNN editor-at-large and author and founder of So What? Daily political newsletter on Substack. Thanks so much, Chris, for joining us tonight.
Hey, Elizabeth.
What do you think she's going to be confronted with? I mean, if you were producing this interview for Dana,
Yep.
what are the top 3 or 5 topics she needs to take on?
So you ran through, I think, the most important thing to me, which is, look, when Kamala Harris ran for president in 2020, she clearly believed the path to the nomination was to be on the liberal end of the party, right? She was sort of the not Bernie Sanders left, but certainly not Joe Biden moderate in that race.
Right.
So she did support a ban on fracking. She did support Medicare for All. She did support the Green New Deal. She did support mandatory buyback for assault weapons. All of those, and the wall.
She did call Donald Trump's wall his medieval vanity project.
Right. So what my first question would be to go through all those things and say, here's what you said in 2020. Here's what you're saying now. What's changed other than that you were a candidate for president then and you're the Democratic nominee now? Because look, I get that people's positions can evolve. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we beat politicians up over it.
And she was in the primary at that point. We've all seen candidates running in primaries. You go to the flanks. You go. You got to win the primary before you then come to the center because you got to win the general. And the moderating influence of the general election versus the primary.
That's exactly right. And everybody does it. But I do think it is important if her answer is, well, it made political sense for me to take that position then, and it makes political sense for me to flip-flop now. I mean, she's not going to say that, but you get my, if she doesn't have a good answer for that, like I learned more over my 4 years as vice president, I studied this issue closely. She has to have an answer for that because again, to me, this is someone, and my Democratic friends are going to hate me saying this, but this is someone who got 0 votes in the Democratic primary this year. This is someone who was unopposed when the sitting president of the United States stepped down. The only votes Kamala Harris has gotten are the 3,000 or so delegates who voted for her at the convention. This is someone who was much more liberal the last time she ran for national office than she is today. I'm not saying she doesn't have an explanation for that, Elizabeth, but you gotta explain it.
All right, super quick. You've heard a lot of Republican criticism of the fact that Governor Walz is sitting there with her. I love that he's her spirit animal. But seriously, is that fair, unfair?
I mean, I love Scott Jennings. I know him. He does good work. I mean, I think it's both fair and unfair. I'll say this. It is unfair in that, as you rightly point out, there is a tradition that the presidential nominee and the VP nominee sit down together for an interview. It is fair in that Kamala Harris sort of created this. They did not want to expose her to the media. It has been 38 or 39 days. So it's a little weird now after she's the nominee. We've been through the convention. Walz has been unveiled. They've been on the campaign trail to now do a joint interview. And yes, by the way, joint interviews are easier than one-on-one interviews because you've got someone to deflect and say, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. You always have someone else there. You can't, the reporter, and Dana's great, can zero in as much as she could if it was one person.
Nobody's asking me, but I'd be flooding the zone with interviews. I'd be doing so many interviews, we're getting bored with interviews. So that if you screw up one,
2008.
you have another one tomorrow, and nobody will remember the one you screwed up. I mean, now all the attention is focused on this. I think it's a crazy strategy, and she's always welcome to come on NewsNation. I'd be happy to do an interview with her. Shameless plug. All right, Chris Cillizza, great to see you. Thanks,
Elizabeth. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.